From a traveler to rebellious pirate, teenage Tarzan, competitive rower, record setter, writer, professional gambler, even mink farmer, tamer of wild beasts and sharks too. Maybe it would be easier to say what he wasn't. Meet the guy who just wouldn't quit, the so-called British Indiana Jones, John Fairfax. At first, John was nothing special. Born in 1937 in Rome to a Bulgarian mother and a British father who worked for the BBC in London, someone he actually barely knew. After the war, he moved with his mother to Argentina. There he became fascinated with the untamed nature of the wild jungle and adventure. At 13, determined to live like Tarzan, John ran away from home and vanished deep into the jungle. For the first few months, he was slowly starving, and only the rain pouring from the sky kept him relatively sane. Over time, his hunting skills improved, and John began routinely taking down jaguars and ocelots, whose skins he later sold. When he finally got out of the jungle, John turned those Tarzan-style adventures into a book, published in 1957 as Vagabundos Bajo el Sol, Vagabonds Under the Sun. It even featured a photograph of half-naked Fairfax with Snake draped over his shoulders. Did the book become a hit? Well, no, and today it's hard to find even a mention of it. But even greater adventures awaited John. After returning from the wilderness, John also returned to school, where he fell hopelessly in love, and soon had his heart broken. In true Fairfax fashion, he plotted a spectacular way out. Instead of stepping in front of a train like a normal person, he would bait a jaguar and let the beast tear him into pieces. So he grabbed the nearest spear he could find, slipped into the jungle, and found just the right cut. The jaguar sprang back in surprise. When their eyes locked, John took a deep breath, said something dramatic, and then calmly drew his revolver and shot him. After all of that, he skinned the animal, sold the pelt, and later said, "I changed my mind, so what?" And he was just getting started. 2 years later, after inheriting $10,000, he bought himself the real American dream, an old Chevy, and took it on a road trip, of course, across the United States. By the time he drove from New York to San Francisco, there was only $150 left in his pocket. He had to return to Argentina. So he hopped on a bicycle and cycled just about 5,000 kilometers to Guatemala. When he got tired of pedaling, John hitched a ride to Panama, where he met a man with the soul of a true pirate, who soon became his mentor. "I would like to try my hand at smuggling," Fairfax told the captain, but before he could come aboard, he had to pass a test. So the crew took him to a brothel and put in bed with 2 escorts. "If you survive the night and they take a liking to you," they said, "you will get the job." Although John was completely drunk, he met the conditions and soon became the captain's right-hand man. Over the next year, he learned navigation, seamanship, and of course the smuggling trade, from weapons and cigarettes to rum. After that, he formed his own crew and continued his voyages. Years later, he remembered that period fondly. "Over the next 3 years, I learned navigation and made my first million." Although John never revealed his mentor's name, it was this man who showed him the ropes of sailing and life at sea, knowledge that would prove priceless. After 3 years, piracy lost its appeal. Looking for a way out, John staged his own arrest. He tipped off the police to seize the ship and then slipped overboard when they showed up. Of the 4 people aboard, only John got away. "I had my mask, fins, and a fake passport ready. I swam 5 miles to freedom." He spent the next 2 weeks hiding in a brothel before fleeing to Jamaica, where he worked for a year as a fisherman, while still finding time for another shootout in Panama. A few years later, John rode back to Argentina on horseback and then tried his hand at mink farming, a venture so ill-matched to his restless spirit that he got bored with it faster than he had ever grown tired of hunting wild animals. Fairfax didn't have to wait long for the next adventure. In 1966, he read about John Ridgway and Chase Bliff's transatlantic rowing feat and felt an instant sense of urgency. If I don't do it, someone else soon will. His eagerness for action was further fueled by his fascination with rowing, which had already begun to sprout in his childhood, when in Reader's Digest he read about two Norwegian adventurers who were the first to cross the Atlantic in a rowboat in 1896. John immediately threw himself into training. The preparations, running, swimming, weightlifting and rowing, took him whole 2 years. Tanned and, as always, strikingly charismatic, he had overlooked one vital detail: money. To raise funds, John went to England. Although he was British, year 1967 marked the first time he had set foot in his father's homeland. With only £300 in his pocket, John started to look for a sponsor. His natural charisma won over businessman Martin Cowling, who agreed to sponsor the expedition, but on one strict condition: no escort boat, no support plane. John would be entirely on his own. On the morning of January 20th, 1969, John Fairfax set out single-handedly on a 5,000-mile voyage from the Canary Islands. His only companions: the restless wind, the slowly disappearing horizon, and his special boat, Britannia, engineered to roll itself upright if ever flipped. When the horizon was finally out of sight, storms arose and unwelcomed guests appeared. At one point he fell overboard. Another time he cursed the loneliness and exhaustion. John spent his 32nd birthday with the only bottle of brandy he had brought aboard. Basking in the sun, he sipped his liquor in quiet celebration. Then suddenly, a towering 15-meter high wave rose in the east. John could only throw up his arms as it crested and crashed straight into the boat. All his belongings ended up in the ocean, and when John regained consciousness, he found himself in the water. His right hand clamped tightly onto Britannia, his left desperately shielding the brandy bottle's mouth from the seawater. He escaped with a bruised leg and shredded feet, and that night he wrote in his log, "I feel like a 100-year-old man." Not long after, Fairfax had to slip overboard to scrape the weeds and barnacles that were slowing Britannia. Mid-scrap he spotted an oncoming shark. The beast was only about 15 yards away. He had to act fast. Instead of climbing back aboard to present his legs on a platter, he flattened himself against the hull, drew his knife, and began to pray. The shark attacked, but finding no space to bite, it veered off to the side and rose slightly. In that moment, John lunged for its Achilles heel, that is, the shark's nose, but, surprised by the beast's maneuver, he hit it right in the belly. The shark went berserk and tried to swim away, but it was too late. A few yards later, it spiraled down to the seabed. Once again, John barely escaped with his life, suffering nothing more than a sore arm. On the 19th of July, 1969, the day before the moon landing, Fairfax reached the shores of Hollywood, Florida. He became the first solo oarsman in recorded history to cross an ocean. Covered in dirt and salt, and wiping dried flakes of fish blood from his lips, declared, "After all of this, I am going to eat a good steak, drink a bottle of fine scotch, and take about 2 aspirin." His crossing was seen as so significant that the astronauts from Apollo 11 sent back a message to Earth, offering him congratulations. May we of Apollo 11 add our sincere congratulations to the many you have undoubtedly already received for your bold and courageous feat of rowing alone across the Atlantic. We who sail what President Kennedy once called the new ocean of space are pleased to pay our respects to the men who who single-handedly has conquered the still formidable ocean of water. We find it an interesting coincidence that you completed your arduous voyage here on Earth, at spot very near the one from which we started our voyage to the moon, and that you arrived at your destination quite near the time that we reached ours. Yours, however, was the accomplishment of one resourceful individual. As fellow explorers, we salute you on this great occasion. Signed, the Apollo 11 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edwin A. Aldrin Jr. John had something to say about the adventure as well, when he finally set foot on dry land. Tanned, exhausted, and about 20 pounds lighter than when he had left, he simply said, "Well, that was bloody stupid." However, the madness returned faster than expected. Just 2 years later, he undertook an 8,000-mile crossing of the Pacific from San Francisco to Queensland in eastern Australia. Fairfax made no secret of his ambition, explained that he was doing it only because it was the hardest way to cross the ocean. The boat and plans remained the same, but John knew he had to find a cure for loneliness. Even before the first journey, when John was looking for money, he met Sylvia Cook, a secretary who quickly became his girlfriend. John then told her, "I have to do this alone, but I will take you on the next one." There was just one problem. Sylvia couldn't swim, and it only added to her doubts. She later recalled, "Because I was so stupid, I almost chickened out at one stage, but that was because it was taking so long to get ready. When I told him I wasn't coming, he was very offhand. Johnny said he would put another ad in the paper." The pair set off from San Francisco on April 24, 1971. They were well prepared, yet the restless waters of the Pacific still had surprises in store. Days blurred into the same relentless rhythm. Row, fish, row. Cook rowed for 5 hours a day and Fairfax for 10, often with his pipe clenched between his teeth. They were rocked by storms and fried under the sun, but they found themselves in the greatest trouble with about 700 miles of their odyssey still to go. John jumped off Britannia to gather food when he was suddenly attacked by another shark. The experienced Fairfax overcame the beast but did not escape unscathed. As Sylvia recalled, John returned to the boat dragging that beast and asked me for a knife to cut it open. Shortly after that, Johnny lost his balance. He had a huge wound on his arm. The shark had bitten part of it, so large that Sylvia could not stitch it. Johnny was blue and I did begin to think, what if he dies? What will I do with the body? If I threw it away, everyone would think that I was the one that killed him. While Fairfax was slowly recovering, the boat was caught in Cyclone Emily for 5 days. During the storms, the wind broke the radio and the pair lost all communication with the outside world. Neither of them could row, nor even stand. They just tied themselves to the boat and wished each other good luck. When the cyclone finally passed, they were still 700 miles off the coast of Australia and Fairfax could no longer do his share of the rowing. Without Sylvia, the adventure would have ended in failure. The pair reached Hayman Island, Australia, 361 days after setting out, thereby becoming the first people to row across the Pacific and making Cook the first woman ever to row across an ocean. Newspapers greeted them with the headline, "It was feared they had drowned." After his second historic voyage, Fairfax declared, "It was a miserable journey. I don't care if I never touch another boat." But then, 2 years later, he tried again. This time, it ended at the preparation stage. He was finally done. After years of exhausting voyages, adventures and injuries, John Fairfax took a little break. Year after crossing the Pacific, he published 2 books. The first, Britannia Rowing Alone Across the Atlantic, and the second, Oars Across the Pacific, with Sylvia Cook. Both volumes were well received at first, but they soon faded away from public memory and were recalled only when Fairfax passed away. Yet his larger-than-life personality still shines through the pages, as later reviewers attest. Each chapter has its own appeal, and the casual way in which this epic is carried out with feats beyond the average human makes it truly remarkable. An excellent read with fascinating snippets throughout. He is a product of his time, and I guess one just needs to accept that. It's not easy, though, when he continually objectifies women, referring to them as lovely, purring things. Dude, we are not cats. Even after Fairfax's retirement, his legend lived on. An ocean rowing regatta was named in his honor, and the winning crew takes home the John Fairfax Cup. In 1992, John moved to Las Vegas with his beloved wife Tiffany, whom he had married in the 80s. There he embarked on a new career as a professional gambler. John perfected the art of baccarat, a mastery that supported him financially for the rest of his life. Sylvia Cook later recalled, "He was always a gambler, and after all, adventure is also kind of a gamble." In 2007, he flew to London for a dinner with ocean rowers. It was his and Cook's first meeting since she had left America, and it would be their last. Reflecting on his exploits, Tiffany Fairfax, his wife, said, "There you are on the Pacific Ocean and there is no hospital and you need to row. He was an amazing human being." John Fairfax died on February 8, 2012 at his home in Henderson, Nevada, apparently of a heart attack. He was 74.